Okay, I think we're live. Good evening, everyone. Hope someone's checking in. Say hi or just put on the comments to make sure you're all here. Let me know if we're going live. Hey, welcome to everyone here tonight. We're so glad you could join us to the world premiere of Mick Mcintyre's new film, The Fire. And my name is Clere, and I'm a producer on The Fire, and I'll be moderating this evening. So firstly, we'd like to acknowledge and pay respect to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, upon whose country we are hosting this event tonight. We've got a great event planned, and I'm looking forward to an informative discussion with our guest speakers after the film, you can see all on the screen tonight. Oh, yay. Hi, everyone. So nice to see you. Welcome. Thanks for coming. Thanks for joining us. It's raining hard in Sydney tonight. Don't know where you are and if that's a good thing. And thanks if you're overseas and you've stayed up late or got up early for this. We really appreciate that. I know people have been writing in saying, it's 3 o'clock in the morning for us. So look, if you've got any questions about the film or the fires, please post them, and everyone's starting to use the comments already. So thank you so much for that. And we'll try and answer some of them along the way. Oh, yeah, Janice is coming in from the UK. Good morning to you, Janice. It was just over a year ago here that the black summer fires raged across Australia. Roughly 21% of our temperate broadleaf and mixed forests were burnt, with 2019 becoming Australia's hottest and driest year on record. Devastatingly, almost 3 billion kangaroos, koalas, and other animals are estimated to have been killed or displaced in the fires. I know so many of you on tonight's call will have been directly affected by the fires, and we offer you our love and support this evening as we recall Rae's traumatic experience. We know some of you will, feel very strongly as you see that happening again. Mick and I have been working for many years researching Australia's kangaroos for our award-winning movie, Kangaroo, A Love-Hate Story. And we have bared witness to many horrific stories. But one thing that's really helped us enormously on this journey has been meeting the inspiring wildlife carers along the way. In Australia, we're constantly in awe of these people, their love, their care for the animals, their skills, their perseverance, their commitment, often against huge odds. And as they fight for our precious wildlife, they just do an amazing job with great cheer and just few resources. So thank you so much tonight to all the wildlife carers that really work so, just so on and on for our wildlife. Their journey may have never been so tough as when the black fires both surrounded and engulfed wildlife sanctuaries. It is this powerful story of wildlife carer and wild to free sanctuary owner Rae Harvey that Mick captured in his short film, The Fire. It gives me great pleasure now to introduce you to our award-winning filmmaker and director tonight, Mick Mcintyre. Mick has spent his career working both as a filmmaker and an animal activist. His recent film, Kangaroo, A Love-Hate Story, was considered for an Oscar in 2019 and won multiple awards across the world. Since then, he has been using much of his time and efforts to save the kangaroo. So welcome, Mick, and congratulations on your new film. Fantastic to have you here with us tonight.
Hey, thank you so much, Kate, for that very warm welcome, and good on you for helping make tonight happen, and thank you for producing this film, The Fire. Without your help, we wouldn't be here tonight, so thanks, Kate. Look, tonight's all about Rae Harvey and her experience, which I was compelled to try and tell just a small part of it. And I'm so proud to be here tonight for the world premiere of The Fire. And I'm so pleased that there are so many people joining us from all over the world. The response has been incredible. It is all about her courageous experience during the fires, as Kate said. And as Kate said, we realised that we wanted to dedicate this film and this screening to all the wildlife carers around Australia, because, as Kate said, we learned firsthand this country would be stuffed if it wasn't for these unsung heroes, the wildlife carers around the country. And a lot of you, I know, are watching tonight. So this is a small token of our appreciation by capturing this extraordinary story. The film runs 6 minutes, And please hang around because we've got some very honoured guests, including Rae herself, to chat through with us about her experience and also any questions that might come up. So without further ado, I want to say welcome and let's watch the fire.
We came to Wild to Free Kangaroo Sanctuary, where owner Rae Harvey has lost nearly everything.
We thought the fire was just going to go right through us, but this wasn't an ordinary fire. This was a climate change disaster and a tornado. And as we got down there, we could see all behind in every single piece of landscape, every hill, the Clyde National Park over there, the Mogo State Forest, my neighbour's place already on fire, the entire area. It was all on fire all at once. And it was coming behind us, it was coming from the left, right, every angle. And around that corner there, I saw Simon, our neighbour, an RFS volunteer, on a boat. And he came and got us on the boat. And the three of us and the cat got on the boat and we went out there. Our property on fire right now. And I said, I don't give a fuck about the fucking house. I just cared for the roof. I thought they were all gonna die, and it was just so smoky, and it was just so smoky, and the toxins and the heat was just so intense. I did not at any time think that there would be one survivor from what happened that night. I know they're smart, I know they go to the water, but the smoke. When I left, I said, I need one survivor, I just need one. I just need one survivor and I'll come back and I'll rebuild and I'll start again. I'm so lucky. I'm so thankful and I'm so lucky. So lucky. We have 24 survivors. Given that I've got more than one, I better get to work. Really lucky. People think that all the kangaroos can just flee the fires, but that's not the reality. Sometimes the fires are too fast. She did manage to flee, but she's so badly burnt.
I reckon she was starving.
She was starving.
Venus!
That's what he said. I'm standing outside what was my car and kangaroo machinery. Not only have I lost my home and everything important to me, but they've lost theirs too, because they knew this home. It's where they came home every day, and it's been just as tough on them as it has on me. And that's why I'm still here at the house waiting for them every night. Cricket
bow. Pompadour Venus's boy, I'm not sure which. I think that's a wild girl at the back. That's Clover. She's in really bad shape. She can't really stand very well. Yeah, it's bad here, but we have survivors, but we really need some help.
Hello, that's my little cricket. Hello, this is my little cricket. Hello, darling. Oh, hello, big boy. Hello, my big boy. Isn't he beautiful? We don't have these in New South Wales anymore because they've all been shot. Not you though, sweetheart. Look at how big and beautiful you are. I had the Federal Environment Minister, Susan Ley, come and visit shortly after the bushfires, and she asked, what is it that you people need out here want? And I said, we want to stop the commercial slaughter of kangaroos. And I quote, we're going to do something about that. I'm going to do something about that, unquote. It's time for you to follow through on the promise that you made when you came to visit me, when you said you were going to take care of it, when I told you that we needed the commercial slaughter of kangaroos to stop. Follow through on your promise. It's time.
Just let you have that to settle a moment. It's a big story. Thank you so much, Rae, for letting Mick share that story. And I can't imagine what that felt like, being engulfed with those fires and that feeling of you standing on the jetty waiting for the boat is huge. Look, congratulations to Mick and Rae for telling this important story, and it gives me great pleasure now to introduce you guys to Rae. Rae's worked for years in the music industry, and one day she was driving and clipped a possum and stopped and rescued it and took it to a wildlife shelter. She was so taken by the shelter and the work there, she stayed for 12 months as a volunteer and became one of the top wildlife rescuers in Victoria. Funnily enough, it was, of all the animals that were there, it was really the sort of mysterious, gentle, soulful, beautiful kangaroos that really captured her heart. And she vowed to start a sanctuary and looked for a long time to find a piece of property that was in a big kangaroo area, and settled on the south coast of New South Wales here on the east coast of Australia. And since 2016, she's had the Wild to Free Sanctuary. And so now Mick and Rae are just going to join us both and talk about their experience. So I'm just going to try and set them up.
So Rae, what was it like? What was it like watching that? What came up for you watching that?
To be honest, Mick, I don't think a lot about that this time. I still don't mention the names of the ones that aren't here. Guys like that out the back there, that's a wild roo, by the way, not one of mine. That's why I'm smiling. He's just turned up. He's not one that was raised here, but one that survived the fire and has turned up and pushed himself into our mob, which is pretty amazing. But I mean, they're like your kids, you know. It's so hard to explain to people that haven't been really close to kangaroos. When you bottle feed these joeys and you look deep into their eyes, and they're so emotive and so sensitive and so fragile. They become your kids. So it's like losing your family, and that's something that it's really hard to get people to understand. I still can't say the names of the ones that aren't here. I just pretend they all got away. That's how I cope.
I remember when you first contacted us and expressed, you know, what was going on, and we couldn't quite believe it. And I remember you saying that you'd captured some of it on your phone, and thank you for doing that, because everyone can see how powerful that is, that we got to include some of your images. So thanks for having the foresight to do that, because I think that's really powerful that we got to see what was going on that day. And yeah, it's interesting that you bring up I mean, we all know, people watching this, most of us know how misunderstood the kangaroo is. So to hear your stories of their your personal story with individual kangaroos is also interesting, because they are so misunderstood. And
So misunderstood.
I mean, I'm sure you've got lots of stories about their behaviours, and that people probably don't know about how, what sort of animals they really are.
Well, like every single one of them has a completely separate and distinct personality. Some of them have got really big personalities, and they like to be the centre of attention. Oh, and I mean, look at some of the heroes from the fire. Lily is a very small kangaroo. She's small stature, but she's the matriarch. Don't mess with Lily or she will kick you. She's pretty tough. Not me. She'd never hurt me, but she'll kick other kangaroos. She lost her daughter in the fire, but she raised another Joey all the way through because the mother wasn't well enough to do it. And that's an exceptional thing that a human wouldn't do. But a kangaroo does it without even thinking. And first time I approached the house, I didn't expect to see 2 kangaroos there, but I did. It was Kanku, our big boy, who'd survived, and he was standing up all big and strong, ready to defend as the threat approached, not realising it was me at the time, because he was protecting Clover, who was very injured. And I had to keep talking to him to get him to stand down and realise that it was me, because he was so traumatised, and just trying to protect her.
Look how proudly that kangaroo is standing behind you. That is an omen, I got to tell you. I'm looking at this kangaroo on your screen. That is an omen. Yeah. Look at that. That's a wild kangaroo right there. I mean, I hope.
Oh, you can't see Lily. She's just out of shot.
Lily's there as well. And listen, the other thing that came up for me watching that again was how the Federal Environment Minister visited your property, and I want everyone to know that we invited Susan Ley to come on to this event and say a few words. And we contacted her office a couple of times and heard no response, which is disappointing, because she obviously saw fit to visit your sanctuary for whatever reason.
Photo opportunities. Nice photo.
And I hope that people understand that the kangaroo needs urgent. The kangaroo issue needs urgent attention. And so, if people are so inclined to contact the Federal Minister and ask her why she didn't want to attend this screening, and will she follow up on what she said to Rae that day. But Rae, I think you're being incredibly humble. I mean, you lost everything, and maybe give us some insight into the chance you've had for a restart and rebuild. Perhaps you can give us some insight into how that's going.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't focused a lot on the loss. I mean, it's just stuff, right? I lost some artwork that I cared about, and I lost some kangaroo ashes that destroyed me. But that's changed the way I'll deal with bodies in the future. They can go back to the bush where they belong. But they're the only things I've mourned. It's just stuff. But losing them, I mean, I made a promise when I got on that boat, because I honestly didn't think that one of them was going to survive because of how toxic it was. I thought they'd die from smoke inhalation. I knew they'd be in the water. The tide was in, so I knew they'd be knee-deep in water in the mangroves, and the mangroves is what saved so many lives that day. Not just kangaroos, possums, sugar gliders, a whole bunch of wildlife survived because of the water here, and I'm so grateful for that. But I said, I just need one. I need one survivor. Sorry. I need one survivor. I need one survivor, and I'll come back and I'll rebuild and I'll start again. And I don't want to be here. I want to move to Wallaby Island and live with my friend Jodie, really. But I've actually got 26, not 24. I had 26 survivors in the end, and that's 26 reasons to get everything started again, because I promised them I would. So that's what I'm doing. That's why I'm here.
And and what's even more inspiring for me is that you are rebuilding. And thank you for sending some pictures today of some of the growth that you've had since we visited you, 12 months ago. So thank you so much. And do we have any of those photos to share, Kate? Am I interrupting the agenda, Kate? Because it is inspiring to know that, not only did you suffer this loss, but you also now are determined to rebuild. And it is a great symbol for the kangaroo that you're able to do this. And
I promised them.
Yeah, and I just think every time we get to talk about the kangaroo in such a positive light, it is really important for us.
Every media I did that whole time, I only did so that we could expose kangaroos. I mean, that was the whole point, get kangaroo's story out there, because the koalas have had so much attention, and yes, they need it. But my God, when the fires came through here, it was the kangaroo's turn. And I tell you, I took advantage of that every step I could.
Yeah. And I guess there's been a lot of very generous people around the world that have generously donated to you rebuilding, and it gives me great hope that people value a kangaroo sanctuary and gives us the opportunity to allow the kangaroos to have some good press for a change, because unfortunately in this country kangaroos get a lot of bad press. So hey, I'm excited to come down and visit. Look at all that greenery. I mean, when I was there, it was black, so it's
very green. After the house got destroyed, we put water tanks in the ground so that we had a lot more water availability for them. And then a whole bunch of topsoil and seed went down to start growing the grass again. So.
Fantastic. Wow.
And they're being built off-site so that we can reduce the impact on the animals.
Fantastic. And you guys are not that far, even though you're not in a commercial shooting zone, you're not that far, are you, from a commercial shooting zone that could impact any kangaroos that come into your area? Is that right? I mean,
we're not in a commercial. We're thankfully just on the other side of the Great Dividing Range, so we're not in a shooting zone, although I hear rumours that they're trying to push into the south coast, including Wollongong and down in Bega. There's a lot of pressure to push into those areas because I guess they've run out of kangaroos elsewhere, and we've still got them here, which is why I moved here in the first place.
Yeah.
I chose this area, it's because it had animals, but they're pushing in. And that doesn't mean we don't get shooting orphans here. We've raised 4 or 5 shooting orphans here.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, look, thank you. And I look forward to coming down and maybe doing a follow-up to show the success of your rebuild. But again, thank you so much for being so generous with your footage, and B, with your time to share this story with the world, because it's it's so important that we tell the story of the kangaroo in as many ways as we can. Absolutely. That's all I do it for. Thanks. Everything's for Kate, back to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Rae. It's amazing to see your property sort of getting green again too. I know that's sort of delivered some promise, just to see the green on the trees and the green on the ground again from the film when it was so grey and burnt.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of forest areas that are still suffering though. Yeah.
Look, thank you so much, guys. And I'm just going to introduce now our next guest, which I'm really pleased that he could make it and come and talk to us tonight. I'd like to introduce Professor Chris Dickman. I'll just put you up, Chris, on the screen. It's a lot to do when you're this job. And so Chris has long been fascinated by patterns in biological diversity and factors that affect it. His work focuses mainly on mammals and other vertebrates and encompasses wide-ranging projects in applied conservation and management, such as the impacts of bushfires and introduced predators on the native fauna. His estimates of the 3 billion animals killed in the recent megafires were widely reported. Chris is a professor in ecology at the University of Sydney and a fellow of the Australian Academy of Science. He's the recipient of several national and international awards, including the New South Wales Plant and Animal Scientist of the Year in 2010. Chris and I have been trying to work out his PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to do my best, Chris, to help you with it, but apologies from me for not quite sorting that out well enough on the few reasons. Anyway, we'll do our best. So I'll hand over to you, Chris. Welcome, and thank you so much for talking with us tonight.
Thank you, Kate, and thanks for the opportunity to be here, and particularly to see and hear the harrowing story of Wild to Free that Rae and the sanctuary went through. It was just awful, and it's a story so well told in the film. I guess what I'd like to do is to talk a little bit more generally about the effects of the fire, and to some extent what's happened since, the kind of recovery that we're seeing. So if we could begin with the first slides. Do we have the first slides, Kate? Not sure. Do we have slides to show? Otherwise, I can. I'll be happy to just talk. Okay. We could, yeah, we can start here. So, looking at the fires that burned over the so-called Black Summer, around 18.5 million hectares burned, with much of this, 11.5 million hectares, being forest and woodland. And much of this burnt in the southeast, including the southeastern region, the Wild to Free sanctuary that Rae has been running, and we've just heard about. And much of the fire intensity was very severe. And some of the fire mapping that was carried out subsequently shows that much of the extent of the fire was actually in the severest category that we currently have. And the extent of the fires was really unprecedented. They swept a larger area of forest and woodland than pretty much any other fires that have been recorded recently, including those in California, Brazil, Siberia, and elsewhere. So these were massive fires, they're hugely destructive. Could keep going with these slides.
Look, I think it's going to be easier for you just to talk, if that's okay, because I just can't quite work it out. Is that okay, Chris?
Yeah, sure. That's fine.
Okay, I'll stop this one. Yeah. I'll put you back in.
So, if we look at the impacts of the fires, there were around 33 people who died directly and more than 400 people who died subsequently from smoke-related problems. More than 3,000 homes were destroyed and much more infrastructure besides. And the most destructive of these smoke particles, the so-called PM 2.5 particles, the really tiny ones, were blown all the way across the Pacific as far as South America. So it was an event that affected not just the Australian region, but other parts of the world as well. We're still counting the cost. The official government cost was that we're looking at something in the order of more than $10 billion. That was in the Royal Commission. And other independent estimates have placed the cost of rebuilding from the fires at more than $100 billion. And that is just really the infrastructure that was lost. And it doesn't really include the impacts, the costs to wildlife. So we're looking at an event of huge magnitude and great cost in all respects. In terms of the effects of the fires on wildlife. We've just seen the terrible effects at Reyes Sanctuary near Bateman's Bay. If you look at the numbers overall that were affected by the fires, we're probably looking at something in the order of 3 billion for the vertebrates. Many of these were reptiles, about nearly 2.5 billion were reptiles. But there are 181 million birds that were in the path of the fires, about 51 million frogs, and then 144 million mammals. And of the mammals, nearly 5 million of these were kangaroos and wallabies, and another 39 million were possums and gliders. And it was really only a lucky few, like the ones that were able to access the mangroves at Reyes Place, where that really had any great hope of surviving. So it was a really terrible, tragic event for so many individual animals. If we look at the invertebrates, one estimate put the number of invertebrates in the path of the fires at up to 240 trillion, which is absolutely mind-boggling. In terms of the greater extent of the impacts of the fires on species and their status and ecological communities, about 830 or so native vertebrate species had at least some part of their range in the path of the fire. And many of these species are likely to be in need of urgent attention. Species in particular that had already small populations and which had much of their distribution in the path of the fires. It's about 119 of these species, all of them vertebrates, and there are many more invertebrates and plants as well that were in the path of the fires. In terms of ecological communities, if you look at the 84 threatened ecological communities that have been listed under Commonwealth legislation, 37 of these were burned. So this was an event of huge scale, involving very large numbers of individual animals and very many species and communities. What have the responses been? Well, post-fire rains have certainly stimulated a lot of regrowth of leaf litter. That's beginning to return. Ground cover is beginning to return, particularly grasses and sedges and fast responding things like this. But of course, many of the key components of the forest environment that are required by a whole range of species, things like logs, deep leaf litter, hollows and trees, will take much, much longer to return. So we're looking probably at decades at the very least for many of these kinds of resources. Post-fire surveys have indicated some survival for a range of species at the population level. These include everything from pink slugs on Mount Capitar on the western fringe of the Great Dividing Range, the Kangaroo Island dunnart. But in general, the survival typically seems to have been less than 10% for the vertebrate species that we know most about. And this has come about primarily from the direct effects of the fires, but also from the lack of food and the lack of water, the shelter that is all completely decimated when the fires go through. And then when they have, of course, you've got an open hunting arena for things like cats, the foxes, and for some of the native scavengers, the corvids, the ravens, and so on. So there are a lot of different effects that have happened. There has, to try to stem the great loss that has taken place, there was a huge management effort at the time. Carers were active all over the eastern seaboard and in the southwest and across the top end, where fires affected so many individual kangaroos, wallabies, possums, gliders, bandicoots, and so on. There was a lot of proactive management in addition to the individuals that were being brought in that had been affected by the fire. There were, for example, airdrops of food into badly burnt areas for rock wallabies. Water installations were set up for koalas and gliders in burned areas. It's probably worth remembering that the fires came at the end of a very long, dry drought period, and many of the animals were already drought stressed. They were dehydrated before the fires went through. So these sorts of additional resources that were put in by people pretty much all through the burned country in the wake of the fires almost certainly helped a very great deal. There was some targeted asset protection the protection of the Wallaby pines was probably one of the most well-known, where firefighters backburnt to stop the fires getting in, and teams of volunteers went into the Wallaby Gorge and set up sprinkler systems to keep the trees wet to reduce any effects of fire that did get in. There were predator-proof fences that were put up in places to keep foxes and cats out of particularly sensitive areas. In the Tidbinbilla Reserve in the ACT, just south of Canberra, as the fires moved towards the Tidbinbilla Reserve, a lot of the really precious animals there were moved out to Taronga and Melbourne Zoo. And when the fire went through, people went back. They've rebuilt the fence, and those animals have now been returned to the Tidbinbilla Reserve. So these sorts of things were done in the wake of the fires. A little bit of survey work was done, but it's probably fair to say it was compromised by the restrictions imposed by the pandemic. More could have been done and should have been done, but it was really difficult for a lot of people to get out simply because of the restrictions. But given that, the emergency response, I think, at all levels, particularly from the carer community and various levels of government, was really incredibly impressive. We do need to do a lot of things for the future to try to make sure that the sort of catastrophe that we saw during the Black Summer mega fires doesn't happen again. It's almost certain that fires of similar magnitude will occur in the future, and the challenge is to figure out how we can best adapt to the challenges that will pose, whether we can identify particular areas that we need to focus on, first of all, whether there are key resources that are needed in advance so that we can be there, ready and prepared when fires begin to threaten. In the longer term, I guess we probably need to move more rapidly to decarbonising, and there are lots of inquiries and roundtables that are going on at various levels of government and in the community to talk about these things. But that's probably all I'll say for the moment on those issues, and perhaps leave things a little more open for questions.
Right. Just getting us both back up. Thank you so much, Chris. That's amazing. There's, you didn't mention much actually about the World Wildlife Fund report that you worked on, but Chris was the overseer of that report where we first heard about the 3 billion animals that we lost during the fires. Chris, tell us a bit about that report and how you even came across that, how you even got to that number, because it was just unprecedented, really, the amount of land that got burned in forests.
Yes, so the impetus for it came about initially because a lot of the footage that was emerging as the fires began to really take hold was about koalas, a little bit about kangaroos, but mostly koalas, as Rae mentioned earlier. And for anybody who's spent time in the forests, it's very clear that there is a very wide range of other animals that occur in the forests, and all of these are in the path of the fires. So it just seemed a very useful thing to be able to bring these to people's attention more broadly and to try to figure out how many might be at risk. So using already published estimates of animal densities in different forest biomes, we simply took the estimates as many as we could get and then extrapolated them to the area that had been burnt in the fires. The initial estimates that came out were about 1 billion, and that seemed to spread almost like wildfire itself, that initial number. Yeah. As the fires continued to burn all the way through January and then into February, the area of forest estate that was burnt was much greater than we thought, and the final estimate ended up being 3 billion, nearly 3 billion. Huge. Just takes your breath away to think about it.
Yeah. Someone's asking, Rae, does the back burning help or not? Will that help? I mean, Chris, will that help next time if we do some more back burning?
I think in some areas it will, but I think one of the lessons that we've learned from these mega fires is that no amount of back burning will stop these kinds of fires when we get conditions that were similar to those in the lead up to the mega fires. So we had the highest temperatures on record in Eastern Australia into 2019 leading up to it, and we had the lowest rainfall on record over much of southeastern Australia as well. So with that confluence of extreme heat and extreme dryness, and then with fire weather, we've got winds and low humidity, very little humidity in the leaf litter. All it takes is a couple of lightning strikes, and it goes. And these fires burnt not just the forest, they burned across car parks and other hard surfaces that you wouldn't normally think would be affected. So.
Chris, people are asking, can they get access to your PowerPoint? Huge apologies from my end that I couldn't get the PowerPoint quite working. People would love to get a transcript and access to your PowerPoint presentation. I'm sure many Australians haven't had that information before and, find it really interesting. So we'll provide it on the website and on Facebook and things so people can have a look at that if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely fine, yeah.
And Chris, have you been able to get a seat at the table with the government in developing any strategies or taking action, or do you know from your work with the report?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yes, I've had some meetings with both the federal government and the state government, but it's not clear how much of the recommendations will be taken up. I think they like to say, yes, we'll do this and we'll look at this and we'll provide more funding, but there hasn't actually been a lot of action.
Right.
I think one of the things we really do need to see very quickly is more action. One of the big things that should be done, not just to prepare for further big fires in the future, but for any other disasters, whether these are huge droughts or rainfall events or whatever it happens to be. We need much more monitoring, I think, than we currently have.
Right.
That will track biodiversity much better than we currently are doing.
Yeah. Well, Chris, look, there's lots of questions coming in, but there's other people that I'd just like to introduce to who's with us tonight. Greg Keightley, I'll put you up too, Greg. And I'll just put Mick and Rae back up so everyone can be here, because I really like to start the panel. There's so many questions coming in. Sorry, I won't get to all your questions, but I'd just like to introduce you tonight to Greg Keightley. He was part of a rescue team in the Gosper Mountain fires. And Greg works with Kangaroos Alive and is a regional member of the Animal Justice Party. And his work with rescuing kangaroos and kangaroos as a kangaroo carer has been going on for decades. So thanks, Greg, for all that work. Tell us, Greg, my first question is about what was it like in the Gosper Mountains? For people who don't know, the Gosper Mountain fire was burnt 500,000 hectares. It was the largest forest fire ever recorded in Australia, and you were there rescuing kangaroos. Greg, what was that like for you?
Well, thanks, Kate. The experience that is exactly the same as what was depicted in Ray's film, and what Chris has backed up and reinforced with a scientific point of view. The intensity and enormity of the fire gave us very little opportunity to provide immediate care to many animals. As we rolled into the western end of the Gospers fire on Boxing Day, the will amongst the animal rescuers, so the volunteers, was very strong to be able to do the very best we could. We weren't prepared for what we would see as members of the community in the Blue Mountains. And we also weren't prepared for what we wouldn't see, which was very many animals to be able to assist. So it was very disappointing that we weren't in a position to provide that care. We did come across, as Chris alluded to, a small amount of mammals, possums, ringtails that we were able to get into the small, around those rural villages in the bush, nestled in the bush. There were some areas where animals could seek refuge. So we were able to assist some of those guys. And for the first couple of days, we just worked with residents to try to locate where animals typically would be, their local behaviour through those areas, and provide watering stations and supplementary food. And that was probably the limitation of our efforts. We did, as the days unrolled and weeks, we came across individuals, particularly kangaroos and wallabies were the main animals that we focused, because they were the only animals that we found. even the remains of animals. We couldn't find the remains of animals that you think would still be in that area. So we were hopeful that many of them escaped. But there's so much area in the Gospers Mountains fire that hasn't been surveyed yet. So you're always concerned about what is out there.
Right. And what's it like now for you with the kangaroos and wildlife there?
Well, interesting. One of the effects on the larger animals like kangaroos and wallaroos and wallabies that were in the western escarpment of the Gospers Mountain fire, and some of those became evident that some of those had escaped the fire, whether they were aware that it was coming or they just kept in front of the fire front. But we found as they travelled through those areas that were burnt, seeking refuge, they ended up on in conflict with the different land uses in the tablelands at the bottom of the escarpment. So they escaped the fire, they survived the fire, but they ended up on agricultural land that had a different land use. So they became in conflict. So not only did those kangaroos survive the fire, get down into those areas, but they exposed themselves immediately to another risk, which was the commercial and non-commercial shooting of kangaroos. So we were very disappointed as rescuers and carers to see that the shooting of kangaroos continued, particularly with these animals, these kangaroos that had escaped the fires. So that was a very disappointing decision by government. We were doing the best we could to rescue animals and to provide food and water for anybody that remained. But the fact that the commercial kangaroo shooting industry was only just down the escarpment on this large areas of central tablelands was very disturbing and disappointing for us. And the government had the opportunity to put in place a brief moratorium, at least until science and Professor Dickman's report, where they could quantify the damage of the fires. But so it was very frustrating working in that environment and knowing that that was happening.
Yeah, thank you. There's so many.
Can I just interrupt, Kate? Can I just interrupt? The segue to that, Greg, is that there was a strong public push to suspend any of the commercial shooting of kangaroos until there was, as you've said, until there was some new data that was presented to the decision makers, to the legislators. And unfortunately, what happened was the complete opposite. The New South Wales government actually increased their commercial quota for 2020. So this is after the fires. So despite evidence coming out of reports like Professor Dickman's, the New South Wales government reaction to that was to actually increase the amount of kangaroos that were allowed to be killed for commercial purposes. So that sort of backs up what I was saying about the kangaroos continually getting bad press when it comes to governments.
Rae, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I have a wonderful man called Marcus who is a darter who came down to dart one of my wild girls so that she could get vet treatment. And one of the most haunting things he told me was as he drove over Clyde Mountain on the way towards inland again, he had to pass the shooting trucks and they were out there taking advantage of the surviving roos because it was easy to find them due to the lack of density in the bush. And that's really hard to hear when you know that he's driven hours to get here. He's done a search and rescue through this place and darted a kangaroo so that she can get much needed vet treatment, only to find, dozens more dead on the way home. Like, how do you manage with that sort of stuff? It's hard.
Yeah. Thank you. Hey, Chris, do you think it's fair to say that the government really doesn't know what it's doing in this circumstance because it's so full on to have all these animals dead without really knowing what to do next?
Yeah, I think it is. I'd sometimes despair at some of the decisions the government has made. Another great example is the koala. The koala, one of the most iconic and well-known species here and internationally. In 2012, it was listed as a vulnerable species nationally in New South Wales, Queensland, wherever it occurs. And if you compare the rate of land clearing of koala habitat, specifically koala habitat, it increased after the koala had been listed as a recognised vulnerable species. And this was facilitated to a large extent by a change in the legislation in New South Wales, specifically to allow land clearing to take place much more readily. So I think at the government level at least, we've lost much of our connection with the environment and what we need to do to protect it. And I think the examples that Greg and Rae have just talked about, the koala example and land clearing more generally, are great examples of the way that we're mismanaging the land at the moment.
Yeah. Chris, you did mention before that you think these fires are going to be more prevalent. What about we've had a lot of rain over the summer, thank God for everybody that's had rain in a cooler summer. Do you think that's going to make a difference, or is it really just getting heated up so much that we're just going to be facing these again within the next few years?
Yeah, I guess one of the things that may happen is that because of the rains, the La Nina summer that we've been experiencing, the effects of the fires will recede into the backs of politicians' minds, and we won't see much action from them. And I think it really is incumbent upon everybody to try to remind the government and the people making decisions at various levels in policy that we really do need to think about the future, that we can expect these big fires to come again in the future. And we do need to have some really robust policies in place to be able to manage the effects of them. And we can't really afford to lose another 3 billion national native species in the future to another such event, and to lose so many kangaroos and koalas and possums and all of the other things that were affected. We'll have to raise our voices to make sure that we're heard collectively.
Yeah, for sure. And we've, as you saw in the film, Susan Ley came to your property, Rae, and really, nothing's been done since then. Have you written to her directly or done anything personally, Rae, with her?
Well, it would help if I did the mute button. All I did was actually follow it up with one of her assistants or people that came out, and I didn't even get a reply to that email. So
yeah.
I followed it up twice with him afterwards. His name was Will.
You're out there, Will.
Actually, thanks. I think it was Jason from Animal Save has put Susan Ley's contact details in the comments section. Thanks, Jason, for doing that. So, Susan, the Federal Environment Minister, did visit Rae's sanctuary. I'm going to repeat myself, but she did visit the sanctuary, and she did say to Rae that she was going to fix it. I think everyone watching this webinar and screening of the fire could write to her and tell her that you've seen the fire and you've seen what she promised Rae that she was going to do and what she's going to do about it. This is our national icon, and I think all of you watching have now got a much bigger picture of what's going on with kangaroos in Australia, and I think this is a really great opportunity for people to contact the Federal Minister's email or telephone and tell her what you think. And I know that there's state management issues here, but we know that the Federal Minister for the Environment has the power to put a moratorium on all of the commercial shooting, because she's the one that has to approve the killing for export, and they rely on the export of kangaroo products to make the industry work. So she has the power to put a moratorium on kangaroo killing until we know what's going on with the populations. So I urge everyone here to write to her and let her know what you think.
Yeah, thanks, Mick. I think that's great. And Greg and Rae, I was wondering, there were so many things you learnt from watching the fires and with wildlife. Is there any way that there's some sort of, I don't know through which group or which coalition, that you could also put forward ideas and things? Because it seems like you just wanted to help during the fires with wildlife, but really couldn't get in, and that must have been just heartbreaking.
It was. There was an unprecedented will amongst wildlife carers, and just such a community feeling there to help wildlife, and the international community, the outpour. There was a high expectation to help individuals, and we found that government agencies weren't letting us into areas where we could be more effective, perhaps, and there's always the risk of personal safety risks, but a lot of us are now trained to go into those areas. So there was definitely a lack of decision making. It was like there was a confusion, and that's fair enough. It was a huge, unprecedented event, but we weren't prepared for what was going to happen. And the reliance on volunteers and organisations like the Rescue Collective that supported the volunteers all up and down the eastern seaboard with resources to be able to supplementary feed, and even trying to supplementary feed animals in public lands was a problem, because whatever we put forward to park managers, they didn't want that particular product or that fodder in those areas. So there needs to be a compromise. We need to conserve species, but we also need to alleviate the pain and suffering of individuals, because that's what the national community expected from our government, and that's why we got many tens of millions of dollars to do that, and we failed. And we failed the animals, in my opinion. My brief experience at this end of the fire.
Chris, do you think there's any forest planting or different things with the actual landscape that we can do to be more preventative?
Yeah, I think there probably are. There are probably a number of things that we could be thinking about and should be thinking about more. There is some evidence, for example, that if you have deep leaf litter and lots of understory, it keeps moisture for much longer periods. And even during dry times, you've got much less chance of a really high intensity fire going through. But we seem to be taking a lot of that structure out of the forests. Regional forest agreements are exempt from any sort of land clearing or other legislation, and it means that we're not really taking care of a lot of our forest estate in the way that perhaps it should be. We also don't know where some of the key populations of native species occur. If we did, and if we knew where the most important ones of these were, we might be able to make contingency plans, as we did for the Wallaby pine, about how best to conserve them in the event of another catastrophic event such as the mega fires.
Yeah.
So, lots of good things to be done.
Yeah, it seems like, Australia has done a tremendous job with COVID in the States, and it would be great if the state governments could take up the same sort of banner. We seem to have lost the power of the fires, that we went straight into COVID, which was a terrible thing to have to face. But it's like we saw the government jump into action. We saw that money could be spent. If we're going to have another fire without any of this work to be prepared, it just seems like ridiculous to go into any more fire seasons with this sort of pressure when we know so much now and people have just learned so much. Rae, tell me about what have you been able to do anything with your property or with your new building for the fires, and how are you doing that?
We're really lucky. We've been working with the Aboriginal Land Council here and local land services, who have provided grants to pay the Land Council to come in and plant native trees again along the dam lines and things like that. But you can see in the background there that kangaroo, she's eating she oak, and that's something that we lost completely. Sorry, I'm going to grab that. That's something we lost completely. She's also eating stringy bark. We don't have either of those items in the Mogo State Forest anywhere anymore, and I think that's why I've got so many animals living here, like a ridiculous amount of birds. A lot of the wild kangaroos and wallabies have moved in because we're providing the feed that they can't. We've lost our glossy black cockatoos because they've got nothing to eat. They only eat what's in that she oak, and we've lost that population altogether. We don't know where they've gone. And they were living here, and they're a vulnerable species. But nobody's coming and planting she oak in the Mogo State Forest. Right. You can't even get it. You can't buy it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've been really lucky. We're working with Land Council, so they're going to be teaching people how to do burns here as well. They'll be training other people how to do burns, and they'll be using this place. So we're really excited about that.
Oh, fantastic! Tell us a bit more about that, Rae, because I know that lots of people had to become experts very quickly for burns during the fires. So how have you been doing that?
Well, they haven't started it yet. It's just something we're still in talks about, but they're going to be doing the bush burns every couple of years. and they're just going to be doing section by section, and they're actually going to be burning the paddocks as well. It's amazing what species came up that had never been seen here before, like native fauna, orchids, and just amazing and beautiful plants and things that have never been seen, not since I've been here anyway, that have all come up. So that's how we're going to manage the land in future.
All right. And Greg, tell me about what did you learn, like with the healing of the kangaroos and the burning? We've seen, and everyone across the world saw those dreadful images. Is there some way that we can train up people to, deal with more wildlife? I know that, it's a tricky thing because vets in Australia, they don't get paid to look after wildlife, and everyone has to volunteer. How's that happening?
I think it's going to be improving. Hopefully our wildlife groups support this, but with the international vet contingent that came to Australia to help and the call to arms by all of our local vets, I think there's a lot greater sharing of information, knowledge and experience, and the will is out there for vets to become further trained. So there was an impressive amount of vets with good knowledge that were in the field helping right across the states. So things will only improve from here, yes.
Oh, that'll be fantastic. Look, you guys do such a great job, and for the few vets that come on board, and there should be much more work with the wildlife, I think, here in Australia. I know that a lot of people want to help. Mick, do you have any suggestions for people wanting to help I guess it's just valuing Australian wildlife. They want to help from overseas.
Well, perversely, and I say that because perversely the fires did present an opportunity to bring Australian wildlife into the spotlight, and it's unfortunate that it took such a major disaster to do that. But I felt it, and I'm seeing by the nodding around the panel that everyone felt it, that it was a rare opportunity for wildlife to be on the front page. And thank you, Chris, and your work in publishing those figures, because those figures went around the world and people were shocked and Australians were shocked. And I think I think the momentum has continued since the fires about understanding more about the importance of wildlife and how fragile our wildlife really is, and the threats that constantly are put to our wildlife. And I just hope that we can keep wildlife on the front page. Unfortunately, they're on the front page for the wrong reasons at the moment, with as Chris mentioned, with the land clearing for koalas, the kangaroo killing quota. I don't want to forget the horrendous situation in Canberra where they think they need to cull kangaroos. So unfortunately, our wildlife are usually on the front page for all the wrong reasons. We, as you said, Kate, we need to start appreciating our wildlife and understanding that we can coexist with our wildlife. And I know I'm singing to the choir here with most people watching this, but it's good to just remind ourselves that every conversation we have is about coexisting with our wildlife and generating good press for our wildlife. And there's no better example of that than Rae and Greg and all these incredible wildlife carers around the country who do this so selflessly, and mostly volunteers. And thank you to all the vets that support them. But isn't that crazy that these people are volunteers and that the vets volunteer their time? I mean, that's a value system that needs to be changed. And part of that's what drives me to make films like The Fire, that we keep this conversation going. And I hope that we can.
Right, yeah. Thank you, Mick. And, I know a lot of people have put up Susan Lay's contacts as the Minister for the Environment here in Australia. The film Kangaroo, the movie that we made earlier, that hopefully many of you have seen, or you can go to kangaroothemovie.com, and it's got a lot about the backstory around the treatment of kangaroos in Australia. The strange thing is that kangaroos are just priceless. Our wildlife is priceless here in Australia. There's so few countries that are so lucky to have such an amazing landscape, so complex and varied across this huge continent. and we have this amazing wildlife that, you know, we really need to value as one of our most precious things. We saw how we changed with COVID, how fast we could move. Let's try and move that fast, you know, now. Someone mentioned that there's a koala rally this Sunday at 11 a.m. in Sydney at Hyde Park for people who can be there to let their voice.
Hashtag Koala Day of Action.
Okay, thank you. And thank you to everyone on. I'll let you all go and have your meals or whatever you're up to in the world. Thank you so much for coming in, especially our friends from overseas. We really appreciate your support. A really big thing for kangaroos is not to buy kangaroo products, because we are exporting our beautiful kangaroos all over the world. And we did it, as you heard earlier this evening, during the fires, after the fires, with very little knowledge of what was going on with our wildlife. Huge thanks to Chris Dickman and his team for making the WWF report, and just the astoundingness of really letting that number 3 billion animals just sort of sink in. It's almost too much to fathom how huge those fires were. And so thanks so much for your ongoing work, Chris, and we really hope that you can make some efforts for the government into, you know, future prevention. Rae Harvey, you're amazing, and your vulnerability and your story tonight is so moving, and we're so glad that you can rebuild and that you found some energy again to get your sanctuary going after such a sort of heartbreaking ground zero place to get to. It's amazing what you're doing, and it's what a sweet thing that we can see wild kangaroos in the back of Reyes.
And if people want to donate, Rae, to your inspiring sanctuary, how do they do that?
Just unmute, Rae.
There we go. Sorry, I'm not good at this. Wild to free with the number 2.org.au.
Cool.
Oh, thank you so much.
wildtofree.org.au. And I'll also put in a plug for kangaroosalive.org. Check out kangaroosalive.org as well.
Definitely.
Doing
amazing
thank you
work.
so much. Yeah, thank you so much to Greg too from Kangaroos Alive, doing great work both with the Animal Justice Party and who are just doing amazing work. Huge shout out tonight to Mark Pearson, the Senator in New South Wales, who's just got the first inquiry up to the treatment of kangaroos. And let's hope that we can all put submissions in for that, just to talk about really what's going on. And it'll be the first time in 25 years that there's been a public review of the management of kangaroos in New South Wales. So it's high time. Thank you everyone so much for joining us also. We are going to have our next webinar, the Kangaroos Alive webinar. It's going to be on May the 12th, Wednesday, May the 12th, and it's called Becoming a Kangaroo Advocate in Your Community. And we will put that up on our various sites to let you know what's going on. Please go to kangaroothemovie.com for seeing the film. And unless anyone has got anything else to say in the panel, we'd like to thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.
Oh, the fire is going to stay up. The fire will stay up on YouTube. So for the people who didn't get to see it tonight, it's going to be really easy to share it with people. So it'll be up on the YouTube channel, Indievillage YouTube channel. But we'll obviously Facebook so people know what the link is. So please share the film for the people who haven't seen it tonight.
And I'll talk with Chris about putting his talk up on platforms so everyone can see it. And this will also stay live on Facebook on the Wild to Free site and the Indievillage site if you missed it or just joined us late. Okay, thanks so much, guys. Good night. See you.
Thank you.